I'm with
Sure.
Elana Heideman from Israel Forever Foundation, and we're talking about Passover. Elana, what is Passover?
Passover is the holiday of Jewish redemption, Jewish freedom, when God sent Moses as our emissary in order to free the Jewish people from slavery under Pharaoh in Egypt.
Is this a big holiday in Israel, Passover?
Passover is a big holiday in Israel and everywhere in the world. It is one of the most celebrated holidays, even for unreligious Jews. In Israel, it really is a beautiful celebration of the journey to freedom and being here in the land that was the destination of that exodus from Egypt. It's a very special time in Israel because the whole country is on holiday. Schools are actually given an extra week before the holiday of Passover as their school vacation, their spring break. And then we have the 8 days of Passover that are dedicated to eating only certain foods and unleavened bread, what we call matzah. And this is a certain kind of cracker that is made within 18 minutes only, and it has been mixed with simple water and flour as a reminder of the bread that was made in haste by the Israelites and the children of Israel when they were escaping from their pursuers, the Egyptians, and then Amalek, the evil entity that continues to be determined to wipe out the nation of Israel.
So does every house actually clean out all the yeast that is in their house? And what about if you're a shop? Do
Every
you clean
house
out the yeast?
Every house does a massive cleaning to make sure that there is no chametz, as it is written in the Bible. You shall clean your house of this chametz. And it doesn't translate very easily to English, actually. It translates almost to leavening, but there are other ways that it can be translated. Like the chametz is also like chamutz, like sour, that you eliminate the sourness also from your home. We clean our home from the idea that we celebrate all year round the beautiful life that God gives us. But on Passover, we take these days out that we can stop and remember and experience Passover as if we ourselves experienced the exodus from Egypt. So not only is it a cleaning of the house and cleaning out all bread substances, but also for those who are Ashkenazi Jews, they take out also legumes and rice, other types of grains that were and beans that were at one point in medieval history considered to be contaminated with the same flour grains that are forbidden to us as written in the Bible, as written in the Torah from Mount Sinai. So we really follow all of these laws. We clean our houses, we change over our dishes, the kitchen gets scrubbed down, and the night before Passover, we go through the house with the children and with a candle and a feather. We search for those last tiny crumbs as a real rededication of ourselves to this mitzvah of honoring Passover, of inheriting that legacy. We are like the Jews who were released from slavery and redeemed by God and brought to our homeland where we became a nation.
Does Israel actually sell the yeast of the nation to somebody else over the Passover period so that they can say, we don't have any yeast at all?
Yes, actually, from the very beginning of the practice, we would any yeast that was in possession, and it's not precisely yeast itself, but any grains that are in possession are sold to someone who is not Jewish as the caretaker of that material, as in again an indication of our commitment to the mitzvah. And actually, this is even done not only by Israel, but also by Jews all over the world. You can even nowadays, you can sell your chametz online. You can contact people by a phone call. There's just a special little process that we go through. And a lot of it is like everything in Judaism, where there's a ceremony that's attached to how we transform the most mundane of elements into something holy and spiritual and a part of the ancestral heritage that we carry throughout these 3,000, almost 4,000 years that we've honored these traditions in our history.
People commanded to come to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover?
Passover is one of three of what we call in Hebrew shalosh regalim, the three rise to your feet holidays, where we are moving ourselves towards Jerusalem. And for, of course, many hundreds of years, we would not be able to always reach Jerusalem, but our intention, our spiritual intention was to Jerusalem. But yes, every year throughout these thousands of years, there have been pilgrimages that have brought the Jewish people to Jerusalem in order to, during temple times, in order to bring a special sacrifice. And now in modern times, it is a pilgrimage of a reminder of our continued commitment and dedication and hope for the rededication of our ancestral home and our capital in Jerusalem, where our holy temple stood not once, but twice, where it was destroyed not once, but twice, and where all of our prayers face to. You know, when you see Muslims in the last month of Ramadan, and they are, and tens of thousands allowed to pray on the Temple Mount, and their backs are turned to the temple itself, which is not a mosque, but it is the site of where the Jewish temple once stood, that temple that was a home for all religions, and their backs are turned to it, and ours. We always turn to Jerusalem, and we turn to the temple. The Kotel, as it's known, the Western Wall, is the last remaining retaining wall. So for many years, it was considered to be the holiest site, but it's not. Our holiest site is the Temple Mount, where the golden dome was placed on top only years and years later, because it was always known as the home of the Jewish temple. So it's very much important to Jewish tradition. And at the end of the Passover Seder that we recite as our families each year, we end with next year in Jerusalem. And hopefully this idea will continue to carry on for thousands of years, that all of the Jewish people will know, and all of the world will know, that Jerusalem is the center, the heart, the core, the soul of the Jewish people, and the potential for peace for all humanity.
And there's special Shabbats over Passover.
The Shabbat right before Passover is called Shabbat Hagadol, and this is the special parashah reading, a special reading from the Torah. We just celebrated this week the new month of Nisan, the month of our redemption. And so this is the big Shabbat right before we actually celebrate that redemption. And then as the month goes on, actually after Passover, we have other days of note on the Jewish calendar that are not necessarily Shabbatot, but that they connect with this message of the process of Jewish redemption, not only in Egypt, but also throughout Jewish history. In the month coming after Passover, you have Holocaust Remembrance Day, Yom HaShoah, you have Yom HaZikaron, which is the National Memorial Day where we honor our fallen soldiers and victims of terror. And of course, this year, it is a very, very painful day for the entire nation. So that those holidays are following this massive eruption of appreciation that comes on Passover. We, the Jewish people, we were saved, and that redemption must continue.
And now you have a Seder table. Tell us a bit more about that. What do you have on the table?
There's all symbolic traditions are incorporated into the Passover table. The Seder plate itself shows the symbols of an egg, which is the symbolic of creation and the cycle of life, the circle of life. You have the shank bone, which is a reminder of the bone that was instructed by God that the Jews would put on their doorposts in order that the angel of death, when he passed through the cities of Egypt, that it would make sure not to slay the firstborn of the Jewish homes in God's retribution against the Egyptians for their imposing slavery on the Jews. There is salt water, a reminder of our tears. There is parsley or potato, depending on your culture, a reminder of our connection with the earth and the connection with the constant cycle of rebirth again, all that we're grateful that God gives us. There is horseradish, or a bitter herbs that are a reminder of the bitter times, and there is charoset, which is this mixture of apples and nuts and wine or grape juice. And it's a reminder of the mortar that was used in the bricks that we had to lay year after year of serving as slaves under the Egyptians. So this symbolic plate sits in the middle of every single table, and the matzah, which is this unleavened bread, these flat squares or round, if they are of this different type of matzah called shmura matzah. And these kinds of traditions got passed down throughout the generations based on where Jews were living as well. There are different traditions in Sephardi homes. There are different traditions even amongst different Sephardi, meaning Oriental, Eastern Jews, those who were living in Arab countries, those from Morocco and those from Tunis, those from France have different customs. Poland, Russia, all different places have adapted different elements to their experience. But one of the other parts of the table is our Kos Eliyahu, the cup of Elijah, which is a reminder that before the Messiah will come, he will be preceded by Elijah, who will go door to door, and we open our doors to him as we say this special prayer and we welcome him. Please help bring the Messiah and let us be redeemed. And I believe that this year, many people, well, many people might be afraid to leave their doors open. And yet we will open our door and we will hope and we will pray. And in that same prayer, Paul, I'll add that there's actually a prayer that God pour out his wrath on our enemies. You know, for many years lately, we've seen different styles of Jewish practice where they're eliminating these kinds of prayers. No, let's not take retribution, wipe out our enemies. And here we are living in a time where great massacre has fallen on our people. And people are saying that the war in Gaza is nothing but a retribution. No, it is an action that must be taken in order so that the enemies know that Israel will not be slaughtered again and again without a price to pay. Let our people go. So as we open our doors to Elijah, and as we drink 4 cups of wine throughout the Seder, you have 4 cups of wine that you drink. And all these prayers that are passed down from Rebbe Tarfon, from B'nai Brak, these words have come down for 2,000 years, written exactly the same again and again. And so while they might, to be honest, Paul, they might be boring, but we recite them. And then we fill them with our own words and we fill them with our own interpretations. And that's another part of the tremendous experience of the Passover Seder. Families come together, traditions are celebrated, and new meaning is found. We recite an incredible prayer every year, Vehisha Amda, he who saved us and our forefathers, and we lean to the left and we're supposed to recline in our chairs as a symbol of just how free we are today. That's a pretty tough concept, to feel free while our young men and women are fighting on our borders and the world has risen up their voices against us and is calling for genocide against the Jewish people. Passover this year has greater significance than in many years since the Holocaust and since many persecutions before. And we have to pay tribute to that. We have to honor that. So it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to teach other people about the importance of the message of Passover and how if all of the world were to pray right now, add your prayers, write your letters, and do more. Demand, teach more that the Jewish people have the same rights to freedom that Moses proclaimed to Pharaoh. Let our people go and let us live in freedom in our homeland. Very
Do
special
you
to have the Seder table, and it's very special to have the legacy that goes on outside the table.
do you actually set a place for Elijah at the table?
Some families do, some traditions do. Some people don't have that practice. I know that also this year, some people are setting a place for a hostage at their table. So it's a symbolic act, and the Seder is filled with symbolic acts and symbolic words. There's even traditions in some cultures where they take branches and they like march around the table, really trying to and carry with their over their backs, pretending to be the Jews coming out of Egypt. So really, people incorporate all different traditions that are passed down. And a lot of people sadly have forgotten these traditions, or they were, not practiced because the kids weren't interested and it's hard to tell the story. I think some of these traditions are going to make a comeback. You're going to see more and more symbolic representations of Jewish expressions of freedom. And we'll see how the Seder will adapt this year in people's homes and in their communities. There is, by the way, a very large Seder that is intended to take place in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, because unfortunately our hostages are still being held captive, I would say by Hamas, but they're being held captive by the world. Our hostages are being held captive by world indifference to Jewish human rights and to the rights of all Israelis. We have to remember that there are Arabs and there are Muslims and Christians who are being held captive. So this massive Passover Seder taking place, we are all with them in spirit. And, some of us think about the Passovers that were, I don't want to say celebrated, but honored in the death camps of the Nazis. And we know that amongst the hostages, they know that Passover is coming and they might be preparing in their own way to hold those traditions deep in their heart. And so we need to keep them always on our mind and always in our hearts. So, whatever your practice is, maybe at your Sunday table, maybe you're not having a Seder, you will leave an empty chair, hope that Elijah might come so that the Messiah might come, and hope that our hostages will be freed immediately.
I imagine it's going to be a very, very difficult Passover this year. You've got hostages in Gaza. You've also got over 1,200 people that were killed in the massacre in October the 7th. They will be sadly missed. And also, as well, you've got soldiers who've been killed fighting in Gaza for the freedom of Israel. So it's going to be a very, very difficult Passover this year, isn't it?
Very much so. I don't think that it's a Passover that isn't hitting anyone in a much more intense way than maybe ever before in our lives or in our memory. There is a lot to be learned from this experience that we are going through as the Jewish people and as also lovers of Israel, people who understand Israel's role in ancient and modern history. So it's very painful. And we're supposed to be joyous. So it's really hard. On Purim, we were supposed to be joyous, and people found it very, very difficult to put on costumes and be celebratory. The families of soldiers are also struggling. Those who are bereaved families are struggling tremendously with this challenge. There are also reserve soldiers who cannot put food on their family's table because they've been in reserves for now over 180 days, and their businesses are shut down. Their wives are struggling, their children are struggling, and they really can't afford anything. So we at Israel Forever have a campaign called Guardians Gift Cards, where we are trying to raise money to donate to individual families and soldiers so that they can feed their families. It is really powerful time when everybody wants to celebrate and we know our family can't eat and they are traumatized. They are struggling in so many ways, but it's not making the news. Jewish struggles are often disregarded as if insignificant. And so we hope that any of your listeners would consider coming to israelforever.org and finding a way that you can give and that you can do and make a tangible impact so that this holiday, which is so powerful this year, really has the chance to open up connections between us and our hearts and say, I'm going to do more for Israel. On one hand, it's the public advocacy and the speaking out on the behalf of Jewish rights. On the other hand, it's helping the Jewish people stay strong, helping our soldiers and their families and all of our society stay strong to endure this attempt at a genocide against the Jews.
I imagine Jews over the years have remembered Passover in many different ways, in exile, in concentration camps, fleeing, and today is war. God rescued the Jews from slavery. Can he rescue the Jews today from the threat of Iran?
Believe that he can. I believe that he will. I believe that he is helping to save us. I will say, as a Holocaust historian, it's been very important to make a distinction between how God saved the many Jews in the Holocaust, even while witnessing the many who were murdered. And the question at the end of the war for many people, and it was asked of my mentor, Elie Wiesel, after the Holocaust, how do you believe in God? And his question, he says, my question is, after the Holocaust, how do I believe in man? So God was with the Jews on October 7th who were hiding in their closets and who were screaming for their lives. God is with us, and he is helping to save us by helping to sustain Israel through miracle after miracle. And yet we can't stop the evil of man. Man needs to stand up and stop the evil of man. And God is giving Israel our power as the Israeli army and as a sovereign, legitimate. I mean, you can't even imagine why people are questioning the legitimacy of Israel. It's an insane a twist of irony, and we need to stop it. Man needs to stand up and stop it. Man needs to stand up and say to Qatar, write their letters and do what they need to. It's not about demanding only from the Israel government to bring them home. It's demanding from the world to bring our hostages home. And so I think that God is very much with us in our fight, and he's hoping that more people will stand up and fight with the Jews so that we can be saved. I can share with you a number of stories about the miracles that took place by now survivors of either October 7th or even released hostages. And they recount these miracles, and you have to admit, in those moments, there was God. And so he is with us and he can save us. But we also need, as human beings, to take the action into our own hands and stop the evil that is taking place around us.
What is your prayer finally for Israel during this difficult time and this Passover?
My prayer is that we will overcome our own differences, which we see starting to splinter us apart because of everything that is emotionally charged while living in war, and not being able to comprehend the pain of the parents of the hostages and the families of the hostages. We are seeing a lot of division taking place. My prayer would be that the Jewish people stay united by making sure that we let this government, however flawed they may be, let them do what needs to be done while negotiating with the devil so that we can show a united front. So my prayer is for Jewish unity, and that the message of Passover will resound in each of our hearts as Jews for our need to come together. Because right after we were released from Egypt, we also had a division. When we waited for Moshe to come down from the mountain, and he was taking too long because they were impatient. And so a few people said, let's build the golden calf. And of course, the Jewish people were divided. Do you go after the golden calf and say, we have to give up? We're giving up our faith. We don't have faith in God. No, we need to stay strong in our faith in God and our faith of that law that was passed down to us and that legacy of the land of Israel that was given to us as a gift and the freedom that was given to us as a gift when God redeemed us. So we have to stay unified as a people. And I'd say for all the friends of Israel, that my prayer would be that they stay strong and resolute and they use their voice more to fight for the human rights of Jews and of Israel, to take out the terrorist that is threatening all of humanity right now. The only way that we will stop this is not only by a hand of God, but also by the handiwork of men who will seek good and who will make sure that they do aid for the sake of Israel and the Jewish nation. That's a part of human destiny, and let's live it today. That's what we have to do, live it today.
You've already mentioned how you're helping families over Passover. What's your website for people who'd like to know more about the work that you're doing?
We are doing some incredible projects right now. There are still tens of thousands of displaced families from the north that continues to be, unbeknownst, by the way, to most of the world, under very heavy missile fire. But because Israel was very wise in their preempting another October 7th massacre, they evacuated all of the communities on the northern border with Lebanon, where Hezbollah is an Iran proxy, is attacking day after day after day. We are aiding those displaced families by providing therapeutic mosaic activities. And we are also doing these for the rehabilitation of those communities who are starting to return home or to pray and plan for their return home. Some of these mosaics are even for mezuzot, those beautiful markers on every Jewish home, which have the words of the Shema, "Hear, O Israel, hear, our God, our God is one," and they are on our doorposts, just as during the Passover story, "Our faith saved us." So these are some of the activities we're doing, in addition to helping a wonderful unit, Yatar, who is the only tactical ATV unit helping to zoom in and out in order to extract injured soldiers from terror situations and war scenarios and to infiltrate any potential terror attack. These can all be found on israelforever.org, where you are welcome to join our global community as virtual citizens of Israel. Stand with Israel and stand for humanity. Stand for peace. Fight for our future of the world. That is what we hope everybody can do by knowing more, understanding more, and being more engaged, and knowing that Israel, the eternal nation, is indeed forever. israelforever.org. Thank you so much for
Thank,
the opportunity.
yeah, thank you very much for joining us today.